I'm Kamran Afari, an associate professor of communication studies at Cal State LA. The short films you're about to watch are the product of creative collaboration between two groups of students. One, a cohort of undergraduate students working on their BA degrees in communication studies at the California State Prison in Lancaster, and two, a group of graduate students working on their MA degrees at the university campus. We hope you enjoy watching these inspirational and creative dialogues. This program is in two parts, each around a half hour. Be sure to watch both parts. Thanks and enjoy.
That day, my daughter was born. I was so happy, so nervous. I knew I had to be there for her. I felt so special that she was part of me. She is truly a gift from heaven. I will never forget that day. That day, my daughter was born. I was so happy, so nervous.
Dr. Afari, thank you for the opportunity to excel in transformative education.
I'm glad that this course isn't heavily Canvas-based because I'm quarantining in a building that doesn't have Wi-Fi.
However, I have interest, energy, and motivation. Thank you.
The experience at Redwood College is a happy one.
Mrs. Nollington's teachings are very much a part of this fond memory.
There are no laptops or online ability, but there is constant communication.
There are even templates of questions to questions we might have.
To make sure that we're not uncertain. And in that, the instructors are certain of our progress.
These are called burning questions.
In what way did your identity change between the ages of 18 and 25?
At the age of 18, I committed a crime that took a life. Honorable Judge A. Egerton sentenced me to 50 years to life with the possibility of parole. I was shipped off to Lancaster State Prison.
While being in solitary confinement for over a decade with other guys that had been in solitary for multiple decades, some close to over 30 or close to 40 years, I realized that nearly all of us, or almost all of us, were still immature. We'd spend most of our lives in carceral systems and never got a chance to become responsible, to mature, to develop, to discover ourselves.
What new things did you discover about yourself when you first became a college student? Everything.
In 2016, the Department of Communication Studies at Cal State Los Angeles became the first department in California to hold classes inside a maximum security prison facility, offering incarcerated students the opportunity to achieve a bachelor's degree in communication studies. Cal State LA is one of 67 post-secondary institutions to participate in the Second Chance Pell program, and the only one that offers a communication BA. The first prison BA program in communication studies is a collaborative campus partnership with the Center for Engagement, Service, and the Public Good, which also runs Project Rebound, providing support to students after they are released from prison.
As a kid, my friends and I created endless memories. In the apartment I lived in, there were 9 kids, but on the block, there were 18. And every holiday that came around, we would do gatherings. And throughout these gatherings, we got to meet and grow with each other's families.
Prior to college, I knew nothing about myself. I failed first grade, and I was the only person in the entire school to do so. I felt stupid and worthless. I hated school, and I hated myself.
From a young age, I welcomed an identity of reckless and impulsive behavior. It soon became automatic. At the age of 18, I tangled many lives that will never be untied for generations. While most people plan their 21st birthday party on a getaway trip to Las Vegas, I was trying how to figure out how not to lose my life to the criminal system.
Throughout elementary school, I was always bullied and picked on. So I was always depressed and I couldn't focus in class. I was placed in a special class for slower learning students, which only led to more bullying. When I got to junior high, I joined a gang so the bullying would stop. It worked. I wasn't being bullied anymore and I was happy. But at 13 years old, I ended up going to juvenile hall. And I've been in and out of the system ever since. I spent over a quarter of a century of my life in jails, prisons, and institutions. On this current term, I've been in here over 17 years, mostly in solitary.
I was given the gift of 50 years to life 2 weeks before my 21st birthday. Within days, I was shipped to prison where life did not matter any less than yesterday. I went from enjoying skateboarding, playing video games, to being a high school dropout, a low-life murderer who will rot in prison until I die.
With so many adverse experiences in my life, I pretty much walled myself up from the time I was in elementary school. So I never really discovered much about myself. My whole life, I just felt like I was worthless and a failure. And that's all I would ever be. A worthless failure. So to answer what new things did I discover about myself when I first became a college student?
From the ages of 23 to 26, I came to understand the impact the lack of emotional intelligence had on my life. While I was on this journey of self-growth, I came to realize I had very little understanding of my own self-concepts.
I learned that I had a fixed mindset and limited self-beliefs, as well as learned helplessness.
In 2016, I was introduced to Imperial Valley College. And once I understood these things and replaced my fixed mindset
with a growth mindset
and my self-limiting beliefs
with free self-beliefs,
got rid of my learned helplessness
and applied grit,
I discovered that I could accomplish anything.
I not only discovered it, I proved it.
College helped me find myself and discover myself.
College has changed my life so much that I became a passionate advocate for higher education and prison systems. I would like to add, though, that even though college and higher education helped me find and discover myself, it'd be more appropriate to say college and higher education continues to help me find and discover myself. Thursday, February 24th, I went for a parole board consultation, and the commissioner told me that I am ready to go home right now, today. And my actual parole board hearing isn't for another 5 years, but they were so impressed with all of the college work that I've done and the fact that I was enrolled at Cal State LA. Just so you know, I was sentenced 86 years to life. Realistically, I was never supposed to leave this place. I was supposed to die in prison.
So much for know thyself.
I'm realizing that self-discovery is infinite.
Discovering ourselves is never ending.
P.S. Wings,
Not
not cages. Golden Eagles.
Better than you found it. It's gonna get difficult to stand, but hold your balance. I just say whatever, cause there is no way you're found. Everyone falls. down sometimes, but you just gotta know it'll all be fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Feeling good, like I should. When in dark, we'll walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best.
You're the one that I want. You're the one I want. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Okay. Okay. Are we recording?
Yes.
That's awesome. Play. Then. I don't know any more English. Okay. Dr. Afari, thank you for the opportunity.
The experience at Wrightwood, I need the page, sorry. It's Redwoods.
Okay. First became
A college student. Everything.
Okay.
Wait, I was like, is it even recording? It is. Bye.
As employees of Homeboy Industries, we have been given a chance in their program to redirect our lives and become working citizens and members of the community. We have been through many difficult phases in our lives that led us into prisons, but have since rehabilitated and turned our lives around. We would like to share part of our stories today. During my adolescence, I was a troubled youth. I used to get into fights in school, get suspended, be out on the streets, be tagging around the neighborhood, and use illegal substances. I associated with people who shared a similar culture as I did. They were Hispanic, were raised in poverty, and were criminals and gang members. However, it wasn't always like that. I gradually progressed to these behaviors after being labeled a troublemaker. Anytime I had any real concerns or questions, I was ignored, disregarded, scolded, and belittled by adults. If I asked for help in a school subject, I was told not to waste my time because I wouldn't be there much longer. Similarly, my parents yelled at me more than they talked to me. There were a few times when I was asked what was going on, why I was acting this way, but they were short and few in between the years. All of these labels and maltreatment from people who are supposed to care for me had a ratification on my behavior, acting on every single one of them. It's as if I was trying to fulfill those roles that people gave me. If they said I was a thief, I would intentionally steal something, sometimes from those same people, to prove an odd point. I was in the Los Angeles County Jail shortly after turning 18. And by the age of 19, I was already in the penal system. I had to adapt to a completely different lifestyle. I was used to doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I was a clown. I used to talk a lot of crap to people and had a short temper. I never cared about the way I talk. I was vulgar. I just didn't care. Sadly, this form of communication is what I knew. This sort of vernacular was the norm in my culture. But this was no longer the case. being in a high security prison at a younger age, I literally spent 23 to 24 hours a day in myself for a couple of years, listening to all the stories of how easily people can get physically hurt made me readjust my own behaviors. I understood that I could no longer do what I wanted to do. This meant I had to stop being such a loud mouth and disrespectful because I could easily insult someone, resulting in severe repercussions. By the age of 25, my entire thought process had changed. I stopped viewing the world in such a distortive way. I stopped being so impetuous and began to think about the way I talked. This helped me become assertive and concise. I listened attentively and spoke slowly. I was mindful of the words I used. I smiled when I talked. I maintained eye contact. In doing this, it helped me mature and become a man. Although it took several negative experiences of this change identity, I believe it was for the best. It was incredible.
Thank you for sharing. The journey of life took me down a long, hard road of introspection and self-development to gain a new profound
perspective
and confidence in who I am. I no longer am an immature, low self-esteem kid. My childhood consisted of many negative influences from the environment to my household, which created feelings of worthlessness, anger, resentment, low self-esteem, just to name a few. My childhood experiences consisted of drug-addicted parents who were constantly in and out of prison. My siblings and I changed so much, I can't even remember a time where I felt secure and could call it my home. We grew up with my grandmother, Gloria. She was always there to take us in when my mother and father were gone. I grew up with my 3 cousins and my 2 brothers. That was my family. Broken as it was, we weren't close to each other, nor did we ever show emotions to one another. I guess that was enough for my family. I always wished for a regular family, like the ones you see on television, but that never happened. I know it may seem like I'm bashing my family. I'm not. I love my family very much, and even more so now that I'm mature enough to see the grateful things in my life. I learned a false view of family through my own damaged family that led to a repeat of the same cycle. I am not the best father either. The view that was embedded into my head was that of a damaged one, and I normalized that view. I dealt with these feelings by developing negative coping skills. During middle school and going into high school, I remember having such a low self-esteem. I would sabotage any attempt to succeed. I was so nervous of rejection and failure that I didn't even try. The lack of confidence kept me from asking for help, made me avoid school, isolate myself from others, and sit in the back of the classroom because I didn't want to be called on to speak or on any topic. I never wanted to admit that there was a problem in my household. As I got older and started taking a look into how I became the person I was able to identify my causative factors and character defects. This allowed me to take steps towards my transformation. And I began stepping out of my comfort zone to accomplish positive goals in life. I started attending self-help groups, enrolled in college, got married, became vulnerable, and opened up in my communication with my family and friends, took on leadership positions with programs I enrolled in, etc. All of these things built my self-esteem and self-worth and value up. As I reflected on my life and identity, I came across many experiences that molded me into the person I am today. Some were negative and some were positive. One experience that I had that was very important to me was my 2019 college graduation. I use this experience because it is a major milestone for me. I am the first person in my family to have a college education. I come from a very broken and drug addicted home, which ultimately fostered my feelings of worthlessness and low self-esteem. I never believed I could amount to any success. And for that reason, I never tried. Due to fear of rejection and failure, this fear engulfed my life to the point of taking the easy way out, which is criminal behavior. I was good at that, so I stayed with it. When I graduated, my spouse and child were there. Having them share this accomplishment gave me such an amazing feeling. In that moment, I gained my self-worth and self-esteem back. I no longer felt that I could not succeed. The fear had no more hold on me. I was now determined to step into my successful future. These feelings were vital to that experience because it was the beginning of my worth. I was now a person who had confidence and aspirations to succeed. I can do all the things I put my mind to. Thank you for listening to our experiences and stories. Most of the dialogue of this performance was from the writings of Michael de la Cruz and Edwin Cruz. Thank you.
Communication is a vital daily part of our lives. It is a thread that weaves the fabric of who we are and what our personal legacies will be. Through communication and the stories we tell, we create meaning. Meaning that encompasses life lessons and values of all sorts, from how to cope with difficult situations to what is considered right and wrong. In this performance, we have adapted the works of Anthony Mancera and Alfredo Hernandez as we explore individual storytelling, identify links to health, and understand the meaning behind this specific story. The theoretical framework being used is that of communicated narrative sense-making theory. This theory seeks to understand how stories and narratives are communicated and their impact on human well-being. It focuses on the processes of storytelling to take a closer look at how it supports the functions of creating identity, socializing others to meaning, values and beliefs, making sense of and coping with difficulty, and connecting other people. Communicated narrative sense-making theory is comprised of 3 heuristics and 7 propositions. Retrospective storytelling, the first of the heuristics, focuses on story content and seeks to understand the significance of lasting impact of the stories people hear and tell. Interactional storytelling, the second heuristic, focuses on the verbal and nonverbal storytelling, and it seeks to understand the interactional processes in sense-making. The third heuristic, translational storytelling, is focused on synthesis and uses narrative theories, methods, and empirical findings to create applications to improve an individual's health and well-being. Overall, this theory seeks to highlight communicative practices of storytelling and its connections to human health. In this performance, you'll have an opportunity to have a first-hand look at how the experiences of Mancera and Hernandez come together to create our fictional character Brandon's life story. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. For our next segment, Motivation Mondays with Andy, we have an inspirational individual who has spent over half of his life incarcerated. Now, at 31 years old, he hopes to take his life experiences and help guide individuals with similar situations to find the best version of themselves. Brandon is a living example of perseverance as he worked endlessly towards becoming the person he wanted to be. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome. Hi, Brandon. Thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right to it. What's your story that you want to share with us all? Can you share a little bit more about your background with us?
Hey, Andy. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, definitely. I'd love to share my story with you all. So, my name is Brandon Hernandez. I have been out of prison for 3 years. My incarceration story begins when I went to prison for the very first time at a young age. I grew up in a neighborhood that was surrounded by violence and gangs. I was part of the gang culture since I was of 13 years of age. I came to prison as a child or teen, and my experience was a little different. Emotionally, my mind was unstable at the time of my incarceration, and my behavior reflected from my emotions. I was a wild child running around the streets of East Los Angeles. I was a follower who thrived on chaos and destruction. This chaos and destruction followed me into prison as well.
Brandon, you mentioned chaos and destruction. How did that affect your mental health?
Yes, so in my younger years, I was part of the gang culture that had plagued our society dating back to the early 1950s. The norms I lived by were based on lies and a rapt sense of belonging. I was a follower who thrived on chaos and destruction and who only aimed to please people who didn't really care about me or what was in my best interest, if that interest didn't serve the gang's purpose. The gang culture I once glorified was a self serving one, in addition to being a burden on society, my family, and to all those who really cared about me. I'm certain everyone who comes from this culture will agree that the way we were living was absurd and our purpose served no one as individuals. We were not, and as a group. So, going back to your question regarding my mental health, at the time when I was very naive and part of the gang, mental health was something that I didn't take into consideration or into account. Once I stepped into prison, that's where I began to see a shift in my emotions and in my mentality.
I see. Would you be able to explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. So in prison, eventually I had a lot of realizations. Emotionally, my mind was unstable at the time of my incarceration, and my behavior reflected from my emotions. I acted out with violence as a relief or source of venting my suppressed emotions. I spent a lot of time being punished or disciplined for my behavior. This happened for the first few years of my incarceration until I turned 24 years old. When I first realized myself changing was experiencing the hole in prison for the last time. I became aware of my path that I was taking and the others that were around me. Therefore, coming to an understanding that I didn't want to be stuck in the hole for long periods of time. This realization made me more emotional, intelligent by being able to understand the good or bad behavior and where it is coming from. This is what I believe has made me an adult.
Brandon, you mentioned the whole. Can you elaborate on that for our audience members that have never heard of this term?
Yes, so the hole is another word for calling it solitary confinement. It's an isolated chamber where they take prisoners who break the rules inside. And inmates are there for 23 hours a day, 2 weeks, and even months. They have access to absolutely nothing and have no sunlight. There's nothing in there except them and their own thoughts and mind.
Looking back on that experience, Brandon, how do you think your health was impacted?
So the hole or solitary confinement definitely had a negative impact on both my physical and mental health. Physically, I couldn't really stretch my body that much since it was such a confined space. My body ached and felt stiff. Mentally, I experienced panic attacks, depression, and paranoia. I'm glad that experience is part of my past and I don't have to live through that ever again.
Now, here you are 3 years later. After your release, what do you want your story to be? What do you want to share with the world?
Yes, so I'd love my story to be one of transformation and positive change. The culture I belong to now is an educational, self-help orientated, and goal-motivated culture, one that I am proud of and encourage others to join. The growth of my emotional intelligence and recognizing that my behavior was toxic and unacceptable for the normal culture in society. I was able to understand my self-worth and have a clear view of my self-concept. Now, being 31, I can reflect on where and when I become the person that I am now, which is officially becoming an adult and continuing to carry out my path of becoming an emotionally intelligent and better person in general. I am ashamed of the person I was, but the shame is a reminder of growth that I've undergone, and it is what pushes me to believe that I am worthy of love, life, respect, and the purpose of God has planned for me. I am happy and grateful to be where I am today. To those in similar situations as mine, I hope I can inspire them to find their path in becoming the best versions of themselves.
Wow, Brandon, that was very nice of you to share your story with all of us here today. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable. You're such an inspirational individual that I am honored and proud to have met and hope to see you continue to be an influence for other individuals in similar situations as yours. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Hernandez.